I'm here to talk to you about longevity, or the science of longevity, or to use a different expression, precision geroscience. And longevity is not mostly about how long we live, how many years we live. It's about our health span, or what they also call disease-free years, the years in which we are physically and mentally fit. That's what we really want to extend. And more precisely, I want to talk about a couple of myths and misunderstandings surrounding our healthy lifespan and what affects it. And the first one I want to talk to you about is actually your diet, because that's a field which is very, very confusing. Believe it or not, there are over 20,000 books published on different diets. And you will find friends who claim that the Atkins diet is the best, or the vegan diet is the best, or the keto diet, or there are hundreds of them. So the question really is, which is the perfect diet for a human? So I'm here to tell you that it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. There isn't an ideal diet. And there's a very simple reason for that. And the reason is that we are biologically incredibly different. Everybody's genetics are different. Your microbiome is different. This is all the bugs that live within us, like 40,000 different bugs that live with us, and we live in a symbiosis with them. Our metabolism is different. Our epigenetics is different. Our environment is different, and our lifestyles are different. So if you think about it, why do we actually think that there's a diet that's good for everybody? So unless you have this information, and unless you ask the question, who is this for and when, you cannot actually tell what an ideal diet is. And also, if you think about it, even if we consider the same person, why do we really think that the same diet will be ideal for this person at age 4, or at age 20 when they're a top athlete, or when they're 64 sitting at home watching TV? Obviously, their needs are going to be very, very different. Now, if you do want to know what your ideal diet is, then you can do a couple of things. Most importantly, you can get something done called a microbiome analysis, where they study all the bugs that live together with you. And if you really want to get a personalized diet, you should get something that's a little more deep. It's a metagenome analysis of your microbiome, which will look at also the function of the microbiome. And if you have a professional dietitian, that will help you tailor your diet. Then, if you want to go a little deeper, you could get nutrigenomics checked, how your genetics determine how you respond to food. But don't forget the environmental factors that are around you. So, make a long story short, one more thing you can do is you can look at your glucose response. You can now, anybody can order now a glucose monitor and check how you respond to foods, which foods give you a sugar spike. All that information can help you find an ideal diet for you at the given moment. Now, what if you don't have the money or desire to get all these tests done? Can we tell what is the ideal diet for most people? Yes, we can give an answer to that. So if we look at the studies on what worked for most people, we can say that the closest you can probably get is the Mediterranean diet, or something called the Alternative Healthy Eating Index, which is not really a diet, but basically a guideline on how you add your nutrition. But again, the average diet that's good for you is about as good as what is the average shoe size that people wear. But if you follow a diet which is diverse, you eat a lot of different foods, you try to eat as many plants, and you try to eat as many of them raw, which is pretty close to the Mediterranean diet, that's the closest you can get. But the ideal diet for everybody still doesn't exist. So let's move on to the next misunderstanding I want to talk about, and that is, how important is your genetics? Okay, and again, you start reading articles, and you will find very, very different results on that based on different experts. So there are serious scientists who will tell you your genetics determines exactly 7% of your health. Okay, then you read an article by a very prestigious lab that says that's actually 54%. And then you keep reading, and you're going to get all kinds of numbers. Some people will tell you that it's all about your lifestyle, and some people as well, it's mostly genetically determined. Well, in reality, to ask whether your genetics or lifestyle is more important is just as wise as asking what is the ideal diet for everybody. Because your health is determined by the interplay of a number of different things. And yes, your genetics are very important, what you inherit from your parents. But so is your lifestyle, and so is your environment, what they call the exposome. on where you live, what are the environmental factors, how much radiation you get from sunshine, what are the pollutants around you. One of the things that we study for our clients is an environmental toxin test. And I've got to tell you that we've never, ever had a client who didn't have at least 2, 3 different types of toxins that were way beyond the healthy level. It's from the food that we eat, it's everything that's around us, and even people in the same household will have very, very different profiles on what kind of toxins they have, and they can significantly influence your health. So why we can't tell which one is more important, I'll give you a couple of examples. So what if we say that somebody has a genetic variant that will, based on today's science, inevitably lead to death at age 3 or 4? What's the role of lifestyle there? In this unfortunate, tragic situation, basically we can say that genetics was 100%. What if you live in an environment where you're unaware of the fact that you're exposed to some poison, some toxin that will take your life before you become an adult? Then it was all your exposome, it was all your environment that mattered. And again, you may inherit the best genetics in the world that would allow you to grow tall and smart and strong, but you live in a place where you starve. Again, it was your lifestyle that really determined what your health was like, and the other 2 factors didn't play a role. So it's an interplay between these 3, but we do have to make a difference in the sense that you cannot influence your genetics. You're born with it. There's nothing you can do with it. However, you can influence your environment, and you can very well influence your lifestyle. So if you are aware, for instance, of your genetic risks or your toxin exposure, you can mitigate that by changing your lifestyle. And 2 random people sitting in the audience here may have 100 times different risk for heart disease or diabetes or any kind of other disease, maybe even larger. So they have to live a different lifestyle if they want to compensate for the risk that they have. So asking the question, what's important, genetics or lifestyle, is about as smart as asking which is a more important organ, your liver, your brain, or your heart. You can't live with either one of them. However, if you understand your risks, you can really, even very strong genetic risks can be incredibly compensated by lifestyle changes you make. So it's good to understand those risks if you want to maximize your health span. And then let's talk about the third risk, or the third subject I want to talk about, and that is this concept that a lot of people believe is that I'm perfectly healthy, why would I see a doctor? I'm sure you've heard this saying that I don't want to go to a doctor, they're going to find something, as if that thing didn't exist if you didn't go to see the doctor. So we have these concepts in our head, if we don't have any symptoms, nothing hurts, that's equivalent to health, right? There's also a concept in many people's heads that, the road to death is basically you're healthy, and then you get sick, and then you get more sick, and then it ends somewhere. But that's not how a lot of people die, a large portion of the population. Let's look at the 3 leading causes of death, okay? Number 1, heart disease, heart attacks. So over 50% of people who die of a heart attack had absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. They had no idea anything's wrong with them, okay? So that's a pretty big number. This is number 1 killer in the world. More than half of the people had no clue they had anything wrong. Now let's look at the second cause of death, stroke. Same thing, number's a little bit lower, a little bit below 50%, but it's still over 1/3 of people who die of a stroke. They never knew they had an issue. I mean, both of these could have been prevented if they're aware of their risks. I mean, heart disease doesn't come from one day to another. It takes decades to develop until it ends in a heart attack. But we can also look at what we mostly fear, and that is cancer, number 3 killer in the world. Cancer is divided into stages. Stage 1 is like early stage cancer, and stage 4 is really late stage cancer. And when you're diagnosed in stage 1, and different cancers have different survival rates, but in general, you can say that you've got an over 90% chance that you'll actually survive if it's diagnosed early. In stage 4, your chances are well below 10%. And again, what happens? Way more than 50% of all cancer cases are diagnosed in stage 3 and stage 4, where the chances of survival are really slim. The treatment is terrible, and the last few years are devastating, instead of finding it early. I could bring up another disease that is growing in numbers and affects a lot of people, and that is diabetes. So there's a recent article in Lancet, which is a very prestigious journal, where they found that over 50% of people who have diabetes have no clue. And we're not talking about insulin resistance, which comes before diabetes. We're talking about manifest type 2 diabetes. 50% of people who have it have no clue that they have it. Why? Because just like an early case tumor, it doesn't show any symptoms. But today, we live in a world where science would allow us to know these things. Okay? We have the tools available, just most people are not using. So again, if you're health conscious, go out there, get your lab work done, get imaging done, go check out your risk factors to make sure that you don't fall into this category. And you also need to understand, just because I don't have any symptoms, it doesn't mean that I'm fine. And then there's a last myth I would like to talk about, and that is that growing old sucks. Okay? So when we get old, that necessarily means that we're physically and mentally impaired. It's terrible. I never want to get old, right? Because that must be terrible. And yes, age by itself is the biggest risk for all chronic diseases. And we're all going to experience physical and mental decline at one point. But when and how much depends on us. There are people in this world who run marathons at 100. Okay? There are people who swim 10, 20 kilometers when they're 100. I saw a guy who was doing pull-ups on 2 fingers, and he's 96. So I'd be curious in this audience how many people can do 5 proper pull-ups with grips, both hands. So this guy's still doing pull-ups at 96. It doesn't necessarily mean that it goes with a terrible physical decline. And then, let's talk about mental decline. Henry Kissinger wrote a book on artificial intelligence when he was 97. And he represented the US in talks with China when he was over 100. David Attenborough is still out there making films, and he's over 100. So it doesn't necessarily come with physical and mental decline, but that depends on the choices you make today. I have examples set in front of me. My own parents are in their 80s. They still both work, they write articles, they teach, they bicycle every day, they swim, they kayak. That's how I would like to age. And I try to make my everyday choices in a way that I can get there. And that's what I can suggest to all of you. Understand your risks, watch your health, so you can grow old and be happy. And what the statistics show is that actually people who remain healthy are much happier at their older age than they were in their middle ages. Thank you.
So now, if this is your first time in Hot Seat, you'll be excited to be introduced to our famous red flaming seat, in which Ernő has very graciously agreed to take questions. But we do have a limited period of time, so please do keep them respectfully brief. If we could start immediately, if we have anybody with questions.
You've told us that it is a great idea to take tests before the problems emerge. But we all know that the Hungarian healthcare system, even the public and the private system, is barely able to handle the load that people who already have problems put on it. Do you think that this industry will grow enough or at a fast pace enough to handle this load that preemptive tests will put on it?
So just to clarify, when you think about longevity medicine and you think about preventive health, it's a very, very different way of looking at things as traditional healthcare. So traditional healthcare is meant to fix a system that is not working. It's meant to treat disease. And by the way, there have been incredible advancements in the last 100 years, and we have more than doubled life expectancy because we've become better and better at treating disease. So that's what the healthcare system has an infrastructure for, a compensation method for. That's what doctors are trained for all over the world. This is not a Hungarian phenomenon. If we look anywhere around the world, less than 3% of all healthcare costs go on prevention, and more than 97% go on treatment. So this is how currently healthcare works, and there's a good reason many people call it sick care, but it's really about, curing somebody who's sick. And I think this is, and we've made fantastic progress on here. What we're talking about here is the prediction and prevention of disease, so making sure that disease doesn't happen in the first place. And that is something that we can do because of the advancements in science. So to give you an example, I talked about cardiovascular risk as the #1 killer. Well, if you look at 30-year-old people, you'll actually find that 70% of them have already deposits in their heart coronary. So it's not something, even people who are 20, some of them you can already find some deposits in their coronary arteries, which means that the guy who gets a heart attack at 60, thinks that he was healthy 10 minutes ago, but in reality, this started 4 decades beforehand, and we would have been able to observe that. Or if we had known previously that they have a genetic risk for that, they could have lived a lifestyle to offset that. So this is a totally different concept, and I do understand that. And there's also another big difference, and that is traditional medicine looks at a single organ or a single organ system. So a doctor is very specialized to treat only your heart or your kidney or your liver or your eyes or whatever. And they know all the protocols there on how to deal with that. When you think in terms of longevity, you're looking at the body as a whole system, to say that holistically, for instance. So as you're aging, for instance, in your body, you suddenly build up something called low-grade inflammation. So this is not an acute inflammation. This is like an inflammation of the whole system. And this at the end is going to lead to some kind of chronic disease. And differing on the person, one of them will get, Alzheimer's, the other will get heart disease, the third one diabetes. But the reason that develops is all coming from that low-grade inflammation, which means that if you can avoid that low-grade inflammation from happening, you're actually fighting all of those chronic diseases at the same time. And yes, the Hungarian healthcare system is not prepared for that, but there are doctors trained in longevity who understand those concepts, who can interpret genetic data. There are dietitians who know how to interpret microbiome data and make a custom diet for you. You just get to find those people, but I wouldn't be looking for them in the state-run healthcare system.
I would like to ask, what is the relation between our mental and physical health? So does it influence each other, or there is a relation between each other, or how we can look for it?
There's a very strong interconnection, obviously, and I think everybody knows that. And it works back and forth. And you would be surprised how complicated it is. So just to give you an idea, there are bugs in our guts that actually secrete serotonin or dopamine. So you can have bugs that make you feel high. So even your microbiome, it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah. You can also, by the way, you can also have bugs that produce alcohol, and that's a really cheap way of doing it. You don't have to buy booze. So, and then again, it works the other way around. There are lots of statistics that show that people who are depressed, they will get all kinds of diseases that are higher likely than other people. So it's a network working back and forth, and your physical activity, for instance, very strongly influences your mood, and then your mood will influence your immune system, and that will influence for instance, the inflammation. So it works back and forth, and I don't think you can separate one from the other. Again, you have to look at the body as a whole. I mean, who would like to have a perfectly healthy body and, be mentally disabled or having depression? That doesn't make a lot of sense either. Then, again, the other way around, being mentally fit but tied to a bed with pain also doesn't seem like a very good way to grow up. So I think we have to watch both, and they interact with each other very strongly.
So you talked a lot about increasing lifespan, but we are facing right now a fertility crisis, and I was wondering if there are ways to increase fertility span. Are there solutions to that problem, or at least proposed solutions?
There's a lot of research going on there, and we also know that part of it is actually the environmental toxins that I talked about. So we know that there are a lot of toxins that directly affect fertility. And then again, people are developing different types of tests and treatments. This is one of the hottest areas that you can find. So yes, and I think that you're perfectly right. In the developed part of the world, this is becoming a major problem, and there are a lot of scientists working on that.
Lady just further along, I believe, is next.
I do not have knowledge about these health things because I'm a lawyer, but I can feel that I can go easily broke or crazy before I found out everything about my health because there is just so many options. So can you please tell us the 3 first things or tests where we can start this journey to get a little bit healthier? Blood tests, or you said this microbiome stuff. So the first 3 most important, please. Thank you.
So you're pretty lucky because you're a lawyer, so you can probably afford the tests.
No, I can't.
Which most people can't. But I would turn it around, and I would say that, yes, testing is very important, and this is what we do, all of these things that I've talked about. But what I generally tell people is, get the basics right first, because we can tell you 20 or 30% about your health, which is really very customized to you, how you're different than any other individual on the planet. But about 3/4 of it is your daily choices. It's, most of all, number 1, it's exercise. So exercise is the best longevity drug that we know. It directly affects biological aging. It's fundamentally important, and people underestimate it. People think that maintaining the right body weight is okay, and if I don't exercise, that's fine as long as I'm not fat, and that's totally wrong. Exercise is much more important than your body weight. So get your exercise right, get your sleep right, handle your stress right. You've done all of those things. You sleep well, you handle your stress, you do exercise. If you've done all that, then you can come and get some testing if you want to tweak yourself. And I think that the most important things to get are probably genetic health risks and your microbiome. Those are the ones I would start with, and then maybe an environmental toxin test. So and then you can do a lot of things. You can do biological age, you can do organ age and epigenetics, and so the list is endless, and they all add a little piece to it. But those are the ones I would start with.
Thank you so much for your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. I'm sure we could continue this discussion all day. So please do go out into the foyer and keep having it. Please join me in once again thanking Ernő Duda for his time.
Thank you. Thank you.